Okay, can everybody hear me? Fatema, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
okay,
can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys, for jumping on the home buyer seminar. I know it's a Saturday morning or early afternoon, and many of us are also fasting, so really appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. We did this seminar about a couple years ago during the pandemic, and we found that it was extremely beneficial for a lot of people who were first-time home buyers. Also, if you're not a first-time home buyer, whether you're looking to upsize or downsize, or even just need a quick refresher, I think this seminar is going to be extremely useful for you guys. Jessica is going to give you some information about the process in general, how to buy a home in Ontario. And there's a lot of things that Fatema and I will be covering that many of you may not even be aware of. For example, what to do when putting an offer in, how to look for properties. So the way we'll structure this presentation is we're going to try to wrap it up within an hour and 15 minutes. The first portion is going to be a quick introduction by myself and Fatema. Then we're going to be actually doing a sort of like an interactive walkthrough of the home buying process. So you'll basically understand what's happening step by step. It's as if you're actually going to be buying a home. So we're going to go through all those details. And then the third part of this presentation is going to be a quick market update, because I know a lot of you have many questions about what's going on in the market. Is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell, invest, whatsoever? So I'll touch up on that briefly, and then Fatema will also shed some light into the interest rate world, which I know many of us have a lot of questions about, myself included. And then we're going to end it off with, I think, which is probably the most important part of this presentation, is going to be the question and answer session. So depending on how many questions we get, you can either type it into the chat room or even just unmute yourself later on, and you can ask any questions you like real estate related. We are going to have another professional on the line as well, a couple of our lawyers, home inspectors. So if you have any legal questions, if they are on at the end of the presentation, feel free to ask them as well. So without further ado, let's start the presentation. I'm just going to give you guys a quick introduction of who I am. My name is Ehsan Reza. I work with Century 21 Innovative Realty, and I've been in the real estate business for almost a decade now, just 10 plus years counting. And it's been a great ride for me. You know, I've seen markets up and a couple of markets that have gone down, and have learned to adapt to different market challenges and environments. And for me, my goal is never to pump up the market. You know, a lot of people you see out there will always tell you it's a good time to buy or it's a good time to sell. My philosophy is different. My philosophy is that buying and selling is always going to be situational. So if you need to make a move, if your family is growing, or if you have an empty nest and your kids are leaving the home and you have to move, or if you want to invest into a good property, we help those clients buy and sell so that they can make an educated decision. And I really enjoy what I do. It's really been a blessing for me, because I get to meet so many new people along the process. So that's enough about me. I wanted to give it to Fatema Railey, who is the expert mortgage broker, who is going to be co-hosting this presentation with me. So Fatema, take it away.
How do I top that off, Ehsan? That was such a great introduction. I was like, I only have a few things to say. Thank you for having me. And once again, thank you everybody for joining on this very gloomy Saturday. And, you know, just a disclaimer to, you know, put out there. I'm fasting and my coffee's not there. So if I say anything that doesn't make sense, that's probably because, you know, there's no caffeine in my body. But you know, just a quick intro on myself. I've been in the industry for 5 years, and I've been an agent for 3. Just like Ehsan said, you know, I think the last few years, you know, have been amazing because of, you know, how the market was, where the rates were. So it's been a great ride. You know, definitely work with a brokerage that has access to 120 lenders. So sometimes a product, you know, at the bank may not be a fit for you, but, you know, we're able to, you know, find you a mortgage or find you a product, you know, that might be a better fit for you. And I love what I do. I love helping people. I think, you know, before, you know, putting people in a mortgage, I love to hear their stories. Yeah, that's just a little bit about myself.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Fatema. So without further ado, we'll begin the presentation here with our first slide. So what I always like to do is, before we even jump into the actual home buying process, my philosophy has always been about, your mindset and how you view things, especially in this challenging market where home prices in Toronto obviously are sky high. And my three keys to success with real estate or anything in general has always been opportunity, knowledge, and action. So what do I mean by that exactly? So opportunity, that's where you as an individual are going to recognize opportunities in this market, even in a high priced or high interest rate environment. There are opportunities, but you have to be open to that, right? There are several people that I speak to on a daily basis who are always gloom and doom and say, the market's up, market's down, and it's all going to burn and crash. And, everything is on the table. We're not saying that nothing is off the table. But with that sort of mindset, it's clear that, if you ever wanted to get into home ownership, that's your first red flag right there, because that's going to probably stall your process and maybe even, take you back a few years. So opportunity, recognize the opportunity, working with the right people to recognize the opportunity is absolutely crucial. And opening up your mindset to be more positive, be more thinking, and just overall having a better surrounding environment with yourself, with the right brokers, the right people, and also yourself. Number two is knowledge. So when I say knowledge, knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is information. Knowledge is crucial in the real estate industry because without knowledge, you're not going to make the right decision. And what do I mean by that practically? Well, okay. So when it comes to buying a house, right, you have to go through several steps and meet several people. You have to get the pre-approval. You have to establish your budget. You have to understand what your monthly budget is. You have to understand where the market is. You have to understand where the interest rates are. There are so many factors that are involved in this home buying process that if you try to go out and do it alone, you're probably going to miss out on a bunch of steps, right? So for example, we've had people that have tried to go buy homes on their own, which is great. Like obviously, if you have the knowledge and information to do that, by all means do that. But unfortunately, what I find is that they may miss out on certain important clauses in the agreement that ends up backfiring them at the end, or sometimes they, overpay for a property which they could have got for a lot cheaper. So knowledge is information. It's really important to do your due diligence and research before you jump into the housing market. Last but not least is action. Action is being proactive. So a lot of times people recognize the opportunity, they get the knowledge, but when it comes time to take action, they get cold feet and they back out, which is totally understandable. I've been in a situation before. I'm sure Fatema has been there before. Many of us have been there. And it takes a lot of legwork to put that opportunity and knowledge into action, because it's not easy buying a home. It's not a walk in the park. But like I said, with the right mindset, the right positive attitude, the right people around you, taking that action can actually become a lot easier, because now you're mitigating the risks. And it's always tough to time the market. So if you're a first-time home buyer or even a repetitive home buyer, and you're looking for that right time to buy, like I said, it's always going to be situational, but there are key aspects of this presentation that we're going to go over that will help you understand how to recognize your opportunity, getting the knowledge, and at the end of the day, taking that action which you need to move forward. The next thing that I want to stress on is defining a goal, right? So buying a home is obviously not an easy feat, but it's also not impossible. What I always like to do myself, and I did this practically when I first bought my home, is I wrote down a goal. I said, in 3 years, I'm going to buy a property. And so when you write down that goal, you start to put things into action, right? You set a deadline. So my deadline was 3 years. After I wrote down my goal, I set a deadline. I started to have this desire that I want to actually achieve my goal, right? A lot of people around me were saying that it's too expensive. What are you doing? Why are you buying a condo for 500 or 450,000? It's too small. You're overpaying, blah, blah, blah. For me, my goal and intention was clear that I want to get into the market. And for that, when I defined my goal, when I set a deadline, I actually started to put things into motion. That's when I started to force myself to save some money, to spend less outside, to be more frugal. And all these things that I put into motion eventually helped me get to my goal, which was to purchase a home eventually. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a goal to buy a house, but you're not going to write it down, you're not going to set a deadline, it's probably going to take you a lot longer to buy something, because with a deadline, with the goal clear in mind, it's going to help you put things into action, and you're actually going to start doing things that will help you elevate yourself to that end goal of homeownership. Now we're going to go through the actual walkthrough of the home buying process. So what are your next steps right now? Right? There's 4 steps involved in the home buying process. The first step is going to be your mortgage, right? So let's just say I meet you, you're the buyer. I'm coming in to give you a consultation. I'm going to tell you guys, okay, the very first step that we're going to do is get you a pre-approval, which Fatema is going to talk about. The second step is going to be understanding what are your costs involved when purchasing your home. So there are several costs that a lot of people are not aware of. In this presentation, we're going to tell you that so you can budget for those costs when you are saving for your down payment. Number 3 is going to be your criteria. So what are you looking for? This is the square footage, the number of bedrooms, the location, and will that fit your budget? And last but not least is actually beginning your search. Now that you know what you want, you have your pre-approval, you can start to do the fun activities where it's starting your search and start putting in some offers and hopefully getting a property. So for the first step, I'm going to give it away to Fatema again. She's going to discuss the pre-approval process and what you need to know to acquire a mortgage.
Thank you, Essen, and I'm going to dive right into it. So stick with me on this analogy, and there's probably a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk about. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, even when I'm talking about this. Okay, so imagine, if you go to a store, you've forgotten your wallet, and you only have $20 today, okay? You pick up an item, and you're like, I love this item. You go to the cash register. Turns out the item is $30, okay? You went in not knowing, how much the item was gonna be. So similarly, when you're buying a house or, just a property, you need to know how much it is that you can afford. So with that, you need to connect with an agent that can run real-time numbers for you. So things to keep in mind, I guess, to get an estimate of how much it is that you can be qualified for. Think of your household income. If you were putting 20% down, you take your household income and you multiply that by 4.5 to 5. That's how much an estimate of a mortgage amount you can be qualified for. If you're putting less than 20% down, you can be qualified for your income anywhere between 4 to 4.5 times what your household income is. So, but those are just estimates, sitting down and talking to an agent, because there's other things, that play into what you can be qualified for. So things are income, down payment, whether you're putting 20% down, whether you're putting less than 20% down. Your credit score is an important factor as well as any debts that you might have. So debts can be, car loan, student loan, line of credit, credit card, the type of property that you're purchasing, the area that you're, purchasing a property in. These are all the things that go into your qualification. Once we have all the information, so if you're working with an agent, they'll ask for documents like pay stubs, employment letters, savings that you have for your down payment, any loans that you might have. Once we have all that information, we can then, tell you that, hey, this is how much you qualify for in terms of a purchase price. And then once you have that number, you can start, touring, looking for a property. There's sometimes, and I think, Essence mentioned this already as well, it's the mindset, right? You can't, go in thinking that you're going to get, that white picket fence, with a, like a 4-bedroom house, right? Know what it is that you're trying to achieve. And if that's, getting into the market, your budget might not be where you want it to be, right? So just have a positive mindset that this is, putting your foot through the door, the stepping stone, and, in the next few years, you will get that white picket fence house that you were looking for, right? So those are just some of the things, that you need to consider when you are looking to get pre-qualified or getting a pre-approval. Once, you also will speak to your agent about, whether you want to go fixed or variable. So just to give you a little bit background on, the pros and cons for both. So fixed rates, good thing is, Your monthly payments are the same. Every month you're paying the same amount. So if you're the type of person who can't, sustain volatility, who can't stomach the risk, then a fixed payment might be a good option for you, right? However, the downside to a fixed rate mortgage is that, let's say your term is for 5 years, in year 2, you decide, that you now want to make a change, to your house, whether you want to upsize. And so technically you might be breaking that mortgage. So the penalty on a fixed rate mortgage is way higher than that of a variable rate mortgage. Now, the downside, I guess, to variable rate mortgages is that if it is a true variable mortgage, the payments fluctuate, right? So when the Bank of Canada, makes an announcement, so your payment, month to month might fluctuate, right? So if you're the type of person who doesn't like the risk, who wants to sleep peacefully at night, maybe the variable rate isn't the right product for you. The upside to variable rates is that the penalty on that is very minimal. So I'll give you a perfect example. My husband and I purchased our first house in 2014 in Brampton. All our family lives in Richmond Hill. Our life is in Richmond Hill, but we bought our first house in Brampton because, seriously, at that time, that's all we could really afford. A year and a half later, we were having our first baby, and we're like, oh no, we need to be close to our family members. So we decided, because we were locked into a fixed rate mortgage, we had to break our mortgage because, and, incur the penalty because we didn't, we didn't, I wouldn't say we didn't plan our lives, but we didn't think of all the factors, right? So talking to the right agent, having that conversation, knowing where your life is going to be in the next few years is very important. Of course, we can't plan everything, but it's just something to keep in mind. So Essen, I'm going to, flip it back to you. What's your preference? Because you're a real estate investor. Do you prefer fixed or variable?
Well, you put me on the spot there. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So I would say for me, right now, given the environment, obviously, like I'm more comfortable going the short-term fixed option, just because I want to be able to sleep at night right now with the rates the way they are. But I do know that when rates start to come down, and they will in the near future, if the variable rates become attractive enough, again, this is my opinion, I wouldn't hesitate to go towards a variable because, like you said, our family, our dynamics change. And if you ever want to break that mortgage or upsize or downsize, right, that penalty will be a lot lower. So I think, again, it's very situational with the times as well to answer that question. But yeah, that's a very, very common question.
That's amazing. And I think that's absolutely bang on. That's what we would do as well. So with that being said, I'm just going to wrap up. Yeah, really, once you have that number, you can go back to your realtor, you can start touring. And then, once you like a property, what happens then is you put an offer on the property. We go to the lender that we want to submit the mortgage to. Then there's an approval that comes through, like a formal approval that comes through to say, hey, we're going to lend, to the clients. And then, there's a commitment letter that comes out. The clients and the mortgage agent, they look at the commitment letter, they go through the commitment letter. And then, you just wait for your closing date. And really, that's how, the step-by-step process of really a mortgage works. The good thing about working with a mortgage agent, such as me, is that we're available by your side. Every time you're putting an offer on a property, we run live numbers for you to say, hey, this is what your maximum purchase price can, because there's sometimes wiggle room, depending on the area. Because like I said, inside the qualification, what, taxes and maintenance are also part of the qualification. So there's always wiggle room. So that's why having somebody, by your side, walking you through through the process definitely really helps.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so now, sorry, Fatema, did you have anything else to add there, or we're good?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
No, I'm good. Please continue on.
So now you've got the pre-approval. Remember, you're actually going through this process yourself now. So you've got the pre-approval. We understand what you can budget for. Now, step number 2 is understanding what your closing costs are going to be, right? And closing costs can be your lawyer fees, it's going to be your land transfer tax, and it's going to be your home inspection, moving costs as well. Now let's go into detail with all of these costs over here. So whenever you buy or sell a home in Ontario, you do have to hire a legal team, a lawyer who's going to be doing the closing documents for you. They're basically there to make sure that, you know, everything checks out, that whoever you bought the home from is actually the owner, there's no liens on the property, things like that. And that lawyer fee will cost you approximately maybe $1,500 to $2,000 for that transaction. The land transfer tax is a one-time tax that every home buyer in Ontario has to pay when they buy a property. And it's determined based on a very complicated formula, but I'm going to go through an actual example with you to tell you how much this is going to cost. And then the home inspection. Home inspection basically is a feature where you buy the home, you're going to hire a home inspector to make sure there's no major deficiencies in the home. And if there are, you can try to mitigate those deficiencies. And then you have your moving costs, obviously, which you'll have to budget for. So let's go to the land transfer tax and calculate this actual example. And I'm going to use a figure here so that you understand what your total costs are going to be. So let's say, for example, you bought a house or you're looking at a house for $600,000, right? The land transfer tax is of 2 types. There is a land transfer tax, which is applicable in the city of Toronto, which is in the 416 region. And there's also a land transfer tax applicable in the suburbs in the 905 region. So let's say you bought a house in Toronto, your land transfer tax based on a $600,000 property is going to come up to about $16,950. If you bought a house in, let's say, the 905 region, so Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, etc., your land transfer tax is going to be half of that, which is $84.75. Now, again, this is a very complicated formula. What I like to do is I like to go online. There's a land transfer tax calculator that will allow you to basically punch in your purchase price, and it'll spit out the numbers for you and tell you exactly what your land transfer tax are going to be. The next is your legal fees and disbursement. This is the lawyer fee, which I was talking to you about, $1,500 to $2,000. And then there's title insurance. Title insurance is about $300. So basically, you've obviously heard about the news right now about people selling homes that were not theirs, right? Title insurance helps you cover some of these claims. Then there's a home inspection, which will cost you about $400 to $500. And then your moving costs, which is about $1,500. Again, these are all estimates that I've looked at. So approximately on a house that's worth $600,000, your total approximate fees are going to come to $13,000 to $21,000 in total. Now, why is there such a wide spread in there? Well, if you're a first-time home buyer and you haven't bought a home anywhere in the world, you are actually going to be eligible for a home buyer incentive worth about $4,000 rebate, which will be applicable to you on the actual land transfer tax. So for example, let's say if you go back to the 905 region, your cost share was $84.75, right? This $4,000 will be applied to this. So now your land transfer tax will be half of that, which would be $44.75. Now, if you're living in the city of Toronto, you'll get an extra $4,400, I believe. So your land transfer tax, if you're a first-time home buyer, from $17,000 will come down to about $8,000 or $9,000 approximately. So that's only applicable if you are a first-time home buyer and you haven't bought a home anywhere in the world. Now, again, for details on this rebate, we always recommend that you speak to a lawyer, and your lawyer will actually apply this rebate to you on the day of closing. So that's a really good benefit if you are a first-time home buyer. Now, what is a land transfer tax exactly? It's just a tax that, you know, Ontario has put on just to make revenue on any sale on the properties. It's not, obviously it's not the best because it does add on to your, you know, fees and your down payments. But what I always like to explain to people is that if you didn't know that these costs were involved and you found out on closing that you had to shell an extra $13,000 to $21,000, which has happened, by the way, to a lot of people, then it comes as a huge surprise. And that element of surprise obviously does not bode well for you as a buyer, because now you have to come up with $20,000 in cash out of nowhere, and it becomes very, very stressful. So the reason why we go over these costs before we even start looking at a property is not to become pessimistic and say, oh, you have to pay a lot more. It's so you can start budgeting for this stuff, because if you don't budget for it, then at the time of closing, it becomes very, very stressful, and then things can get chaotic, and you'll just have to run around to get the cash, and it's not enjoyable. You want your first time home buying process to be enjoyable. So that's why you want to get all your cards right before you actually start the process. So now that we have understood the closing costs, let's go on to step number 3. So now we're actually going to be starting to look at homes and deciding on the criteria of your home. So the first thing that we're going to do when I sit down with you, we're going to discuss your needs. What is the size? What is the special features, lifestyles that you need for your home? The next thing is going to be the location. Where do you want to live, right? Do you want to live close to work, close to schools? Are there special amenities you want to be nearby? Maybe you have family or friends in a specific area. So we're going to look at location as well. Number 3 is considering new build or resale, right? So you're going to have 2 options. You're going to have the option of buying a resale property, which is on the market, ready to move in right away. Or you're going to have the option of buying a new build property, which will allow you to basically buy a brand new home. But when you buy a brand new home, I would say the negatives, not the negatives, maybe something to look out for are going to be the time factor. So when you buy a new home, that home is not going to be ready right away. It's going to be ready maybe in a couple of years, maybe a year or 2 years down the road. And new homes are typically a bit more expensive. So there is a bit of a premium naturally because they are brand new. But the good thing about a new home is that everything is new. You get warranties in the property. You don't have to worry about repairs or maintenance as much as you would as a resale property, because everything is brand new. The roof is new, the appliances are new, the furnace is new. So buying a new build is a good option, but it does come at a little bit of a premium. So now we've decided to understand what our criteria is. Now we're going to get to the actual fun part, which is beginning your search and understanding the buying process. Now, these are a lot of steps over here, but I really want you guys to kind of focus on this, because this is the meat and potatoes of the offer buying process. And if we miss out on these things, then it can get a little bit complicated. So the first thing that we're going to consider so let's just say we found a home. You found a home that you like, let's say in Richmond Hill, and you've decided that you want to move into this house, you want to put an offer in. Okay, so now before making an offer to purchase, we're going to determine 3 separate things. The first thing is the price. Second thing is going to be the deposit. And the third thing is going to be the closing date. So let's break this down in further detail. The price, what are we going to offer for that property? The way we look at pricing is I'm going to pull a few comparables in the neighborhood to let you know what sold recently. And basically sorry, just give me 1 second, guys. Okay, I had a question there. Yeah, so what we're gonna do is discuss the price. How are we gonna come up to a price point? So let's just say the house cost $1 million. I'm gonna say, Mr. Buyer and Mrs. Buyer, the last 2 homes in this neighborhood in the last 30 days sold for $990,000 and $995,000. So we have an idea as to what the expectation is going to be on the seller side. And if there's not a competing offer, we may even go in at, let's say, $960,000, $970,000, and see if we can negotiate a price that's reasonable for us. That's number 1. The second thing is going to be the deposit. Now, whenever you buy a home in Ontario, you do have to put a deposit when the offer gets accepted. So a deposit is going to be about 4 or 5% of your purchase price. So, if you put an offer in for $1 million, you should give a deposit of anywhere between 25 to 50,000, maybe closer to 50,000, I would say, right? And that deposit will be given to the seller's brokerage, not the seller himself. It's going to go to the seller's brokerage. It's going to stay in trust, and it's going to stay with them until the day of closing. That deposit is going to also go towards your down payment that will be bounced out on closing day. So it's important to have that money ready and available, because it'll be due 24 hours after your offer has been accepted. The next thing to negotiate is going to be the closing date. So closing is basically, when are you going to get possession of the property, right? When are you going to actually get the keys physically in your hands? Now, some people will ask for a closing of 30 days. Some will ask for 60 days. Some will ask for 90 days. If, let's say, you're leasing or renting out a property, you'll probably need about 60 days to 70 days, because you have to give your landlord notice. So typically anywhere between 30 to 90 days is standard for a closing date. Now, let's just say you got the offer accepted, right? Now we're going to put things in the actual offer. These are important clauses that I highly, highly recommend for everyone to put in their offers. And the first thing is going to be your conditions. So satisfying your conditions. Every offer is going to have what's called a financing condition and an inspection condition. So Fatema talked about getting your pre-approval, making sure you understand what your budget is. But when you have a written offer that's accepted, you need to take that written offer and give it to Fatema. Fatema is going to go to her lenders, and they're going to have 5 business days to basically get you that firm approval. In those 5 days, for whatever reason, you change your mind or something comes up and you can't get the mortgage, you can actually back out of the agreement and you get your full deposit back. So your deposit is protected for 5 business days. The second thing is going to be your inspection. So in those 5 days that we have, you're also going to be doing a home inspection. A home inspection basically will be where you hire a professional home inspector. They're going to look at things like the roof, the furnace, the air conditioner, the appliances, the foundation, any leakages, and they're going to look for any major deficiencies. Now, every home is going to have some minor issues, but if you find something that's major and you're not comfortable moving forward, for example, let's say there's a foundation crack, which is pretty major, right? You have the opportunity to still back out of the agreement and get your deposit back in full. Now, let's say that the financing goes well, you got the mortgage, the inspection goes well, there's no issues in the home, and you're ready to move forward. You're going to sign what's called a waiver form, which means that you're going to basically waive your conditions. When you waive those conditions, after that point, if you decide to back out, obviously you can't do that because now you're committed to the agreement and you would lose your deposit if, let's say, you change your mind. Now, the next thing here is adding important clauses to your agreement of purchase and sale. Now, these are things that are not mentioned in this slide specifically, but I'm going to share this stuff with you because this stuff is absolutely crucial. And a lot of people who try to go out alone to buy a home, this is what they forget about. So please listen carefully if you can to this. Number one, in the offer, what I always like to do is make sure I put in the offer that all of the appliances are going to be included with the purchase price. I had a situation with a colleague of mine who was representing a buyer and they put an offer in, they got a great price, but he was new, he forgot to put in the extra section that all the appliances will be included. So when it came time to closing, they came to the house and all the appliances were gone. And when they went to fight for it, well, the offer said the appliances were not included. So whatever you see in the home, except for the furniture, the appliances should be mentioned specifically. So if it's a stainless steel fridge, you mention that. The fridge, the dishwasher, the washer, dryer, everything is to be included in the purchase price, including any rental items such as the hot water tank or if the furnace is a rental or whatnot. The second thing we want to add is, and this might sound kind of funny, but it's important. You want to make sure you add that there was no criminal activity or any crime or suicide in the property, which, you know, it has happened before. But we want to make sure that we know that information upfront. Why do we ask for that? Is because if, let's say, there is a stigma or there was something that happened in this property and you didn't know about it and you bought it and you tried to resell that property, and if somebody found out, it's going to significantly devalue your home, like by a lot. So you don't want to get stuck in that process. So you want to put a clause in it that says that, you know, as to the best of the seller's ability, there was no criminal activity, there was no cannabis, there was no grow up operation happening here. That stuff is extremely crucial as well. And then what we want to also put in the agreement is that the home is going to be given to you in a clean and broom swept and vacant condition. A lot of times what happens is that sellers, when they leave the home, obviously they're so busy, they may not clean the house properly, or they may leave furniture here and there. And so we want to make sure that everything is empty, because the last thing you want is to call a truck or a junkyard removal company and have you end up paying that, not even the money, but having the time and effort to go through that, because you're moving, you're already stressed out. The last thing you want is to throw out the seller's garbage or junk. So that's very important. The next thing we're going to put in the agreement is that from the time you bought the property until the day of closing, when you get the keys, you're going to have the opportunity to do 2 visits to the property. What I mean by that is that you can go to the house after you bought the property to show your family or friends, to take measurements for furniture so that you can get a head start. But I always recommend that you keep one visit a day or two before closing. The reason why I recommend that is because when we do that visit the day before closing, we can look for any deficiencies, because in those 2 months, anything can happen, right? The furniture, there could be holes in the wall. Maybe there was a leakage in those 2 months. Maybe something happened, something broke. So that final walkthrough will allow us, the buyers, to understand and make sure that the home was the same way as it was when we first saw it and when we first put the offer in. Now, what happens when you notice something major? Let's just say there was the dishwasher was leaking. Now we have the opportunity to go back to the sellers and tell them that, well, we put a clause in the agreement saying that all the appliances should have been in good working order. So now they have to do that. And if they don't do that, then we speak with the lawyer, and the lawyer is going to hold back some money. So this is why these clauses are so important. This is why it's so important to understand what you're putting in, what you're writing, because if you don't do that, it's going to be chaotic, and you're going to find yourself in a lot more stress than you would if you hadn't put these things in there. So now let's just say everything is done. We've bought the home, we've satisfied the conditions, we've done the final walkthrough. We're now going to meet with the lawyer, and the lawyers that we work with are Zamir and Nabil, which will have their information for you. They're going to be doing all the closing documents for you. Like I said, they're going to make sure that there's no liens on the seller's property, that the actual sellers are who they are. And they're going to meet with you and make sure that everything is done properly with their due diligence. Once you meet them, you do your closing documents. You're going to sign up for your utilities. So your water, your heat, your hydro, make sure that's all set up. You're going to get your insurance. You're going to also change your locks on the day of closing, because you don't know who's going to have a copy of your keys, right? So I always recommend doing that. And then it's moving day. Now you've bought your house, closing day is here. You've got the keys, congratulations. And now you get to the fun part, which is paying your mortgage. So now that you're a homeowner, what are some key steps to look out for? Obviously, you want to make your mortgage payments on time. Make sure you don't default. The next thing is going to be plan for the cost of operating a home. So I just recently moved as well. And, obviously it's been a while since I've moved, but I didn't realize myself, being a realtor, that there's so many other expenses to look out for. So your furniture, any upgrades you want to do, even things like just, your first run of your grocery bill is going to be high. So these amount to a lot of expenses. What I always recommend is that you plan for this, just like you were budgeting before for your closing costs. Also plan for this as well, and budget for this first month or 2 months of expenses, which is going to be a bit more expensive, and then things will calm down later on. You want to save for emergencies. So one thing that we do is we put away a couple of $100 every month, right? Just to save for any emergency, because things will break down, right? You're a homeowner. There might be issues later on with your appliances. There might be a plumbing issue. There might be an electrical issue. We want to save for emergency and have that reserve slush fund so that we can budget for those items, so that we're not paying a whole lot of cash upfront. Now, one really important tip here that I want to share with all of you guys is that when we do put the offer in, what I always like to do is I always like to ask the sellers, what is the age of the roof? What is the age of the appliances? How old is the AC? The reason why I ask for this information is because if it's an older home, and I know that these items are about to be at the end of their life cycle, then I know that I have to replace them one way or the other. Either I can ask the seller to give me a discount on the price, or I can give them an offer less those repair expenses, and I will start to budget for those expenses myself. So it's very important to understand these elements of the property, because when we don't do that, and we go in with an offer and we go in with the inspection, sometimes we come back and we realize, oh, everything is so old in this house, I should never have put an offer in anyways. Not to say that you shouldn't buy older homes, but when you have this information beforehand, trust me, it makes things a lot easier for you and gives you some peace of mind going into the process. The next thing is living within your budget, right? Obviously now with the things the way they are, with interest rates sky high and the cost of living, I think it's very important to live within your budget. And this is where I go back to Fatema's point, is that as your first property, you don't have to go for that dream house. You don't have to go for that white picket fence, because Quite frankly, we may not even be able to afford that at this time of our lives. So what should we do? Maybe instead of getting a 3-bedroom detached home, we go for like a 3-bedroom condo townhome, which may be a couple $100,000 cheaper. Now, it may not be the biggest home, it may not have the best renovations, but the key is to get into home ownership, right? And take my example. When I bought my home a few years ago, I didn't start with a house or a detached home. I started with a small 1-bedroom plus condo, which was barely 800 square feet. And I bought it, and people around me were saying, "Why are you buying a house that's small and so expensive? It cost me about 450 grand." But I bought it. I said, my goal is to get into a home one way or the other. If it's a condo or a townhome, doesn't matter. I bought the home. Fast forward 3 years later, that home went for 450 to about 570,000, which I sold for 150K more. I used that equity I built over time, and I parlayed that into my new home, which was a townhome, which I bought just a couple years before. And so what that did was getting to that condo allowed me to build equity. In that 3-year time frame, I was also able to save more money. My income grew as well. As time goes on, your income is going to grow as well. You're going to get a better job, more pay. And so things happen progressively. And then you can actually get into your dream home or a home that would be better for you. The next thing is going to be your home maintenance, like I talked about as well. Just maintaining your home on a regular basis so that you don't have to do all of your renovations all up front. If, let's say, something breaks down, try to address it immediately instead of holding back and waiting and waiting and waiting. Then things get worse. It may even break. You have to replace the entire feature. So try to maintain your home on a regular basis, and saving for those emergencies, having that reserve fund is definitely going to help. Okay, so I know we're getting a little bit over time here. I'm just gonna quickly share the slide with you, and then we're gonna get into some Q&As. Buying versus renting, what are the pros, what are the cons? Again, there's nothing wrong with renting, absolutely. I think if you are saving your money and your goal is home ownership, absolutely rent and enjoy your home. But in that process, understand that, when you do have your own home, nobody's going to come and tell you that you have to leave if the landlords want to move in or want to sell the home. When you're buying a home, you're building equity for your home as the value appreciates. You're contributing to your own financial plan. You can also use your registered retirement funds as a first-time home buyer to use for your down payment. And then you have your pride of home ownership. When you're renting, you are paying rent, and you're going to be contributing to somebody else's financial plan. Your money is going to go towards the landlord's equity, right? You don't have ownership. So again, there's nothing wrong with renting. Obviously, in this high price environment, we may have to rent for a couple of years. But if you have a plan to buy a home, or if you're in a position to buy a home and you're just waiting, my sincere advice is to at least have a pulse on the market to see what's out there and see if there's a home that might be right for you in the right budget as well. These are some first-time home buyer incentives, which I'm not going to go over right now, but I will forward you guys these slides later on so you can review them. Now, before we end off, just a quick little market update for you guys, as I'm sure this is probably the most pressing matter right now. What we saw in the last 6 months was really, really interesting, where the market really corrected about 20 to 25% in the Greater Toronto area overall. What we're seeing now, actually in the last month or so, is a bit of a resurgence in price and also sales. So I want to go over some year-over-year numbers with you over here before we go over the month-over-month numbers. So in February of this year, we had about 4,700 sales. This was actually down by almost 47% year over year. The reason why this number is so wide is because last year in February was a record-breaking month, and it was the highest, I would say, sales and average price that we saw in a while. The average price this February was about 1.095. Last year, it was about 1.334, so it was down 18%. Again, we're comparing it to the highest peak of the real estate market, which was last year. Now what we're seeing from last month to this month is a bit of a resurgence. So in January, we saw 3,100 sales. That went up to 4,783 sales in February. In January, the average price was 1.038. Now the average price in February was 1.095. So we are seeing a bit of an uptick in activity. There are still a lot of opportunities out there, but I am seeing that there are more buyers out there in the market. There's not a lot of inventory, which is obviously creating more multiple offers, more bidding, and more demand. But again, you have to identify those opportunities in the market and understand what you can afford and where you can buy. This is the TREB housing market chart. So as you can see, from all the way from 94 January up until January 2020, you can see that there were fluctuations throughout the market, throughout the years, but eventually home values do tend to go up. They go up and down, but they go upwards. And I believe in the future, we're probably going to see this trend continue, not because we're trying to pump up the market, but just because the level of immigration coming into Canada, our population growth is exploding. We don't build enough homes. There's not enough supply. And quite honestly, a lot of the people that are coming into this country do have cash that they can buy properties with, and it's inflating those prices. So if we can fix the housing supply in this province, that can help a little bit. But the way our population is growing, my advice is that in the next 10 years, I don't know where the prices are going to be. If anything, they're going to be a lot higher. So we try to get in the market as soon as we can if the situation is right. Just so in the next 10, 20 years, if our kids want to get into the market or buy a home, we have some assets for them that they can rely on for a down payment. All right, that was interesting as we're all fasting, or some of us were fasting, and didn't have my caffeine either, so quite thirsty right now. But thank you so much, guys, for joining this presentation. I apologize if it was a bit long, but I just wanted to share those information with you. Again, this is going to be recorded. We are going to send this out to everybody so you can refer back to this. We're going to be doing a Q&A right now for all of you guys. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, or you can just chat in the chat box over here.
Assalamu alaikum. I think I can go first and break the silence if that's okay.
Sure, please do.
Thank you. My question is around, you mentioned that the first house you buy may not be your dream house, or it may just be a starter, that you're getting your foot inside the housing market. What do you recommend after that happens? Like, you put your foot in, are you obligated to stay somewhere long term? Like, what's the minimum would you recommend, knowing what the market is like right now?
Right. Did you want me to start, Fatema?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a very good question. Well, I think first of all, it's great that you have a property in hand. A lot of people unfortunately are not in that position. So even though it's not your dream home, at least you have built some equity in that property. Just again, going back to my own example, right? I think personal examples always help you visualize what to do next. When I bought our first condo, it was a small condo, like barely 800 square feet. And we did not even move into that property because as time went on, we had a child and we saw the condo when it was built and we're like, we can't really live in this. It's too small. So we decided to stay with our parents. We rented it out for a year or so. But even though that wasn't our dream home, it helped us build equity. And what I found was that after, I think, 2 years, when our personal finances became a little bit better, and I was budgeting for a home, I found that I was in a position to now put a bigger down payment for a home that would serve my purpose better. Again, not my dream home, the townhouse, but a step up, right? So I think to answer your question, if you're in a situation where you feel that you have the funds and that you can maintain the monthly financing, the mortgage, the property taxes, all that stuff, and you're in a position where you can actually cover those expenses and make that move forward, then by all means, I think you should definitely start looking. If there's any hesitancy where you feel like moving forward is going to put you in a tight situation and you're going to be living, let's say, paycheck to paycheck, for me personally, I don't recommend that, because as much as you may enjoy living in that home, if you're not happy and you're struggling every month, then there's really no point, because you may just end up having to sell that property after a year, right? And I considered that heavily when I bought my townhome, because I said, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm here for 6 months and I'm out. So when I was absolutely ready, I even saved like some reserve funds ahead of time just as an insurance. Then I planned out my monthly expenses properly. Obviously, with the interest rates going up, that kind of had an impact. But what I did was I tried to save in other ways. So I cut down my spending in other ways, and I used that savings and I just basically use it to pay off the increase in my mortgage. So I think that, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really a personal decision. But I think just making sure that you have the ability to maintain the next upsize, whether it's after a year, 3 years, or 5 years, I think it's very crucial that you sit down and look at your budgeting and make sure you're able to maintain or pay off your household expenses without having the stress of, being hand to mouth or paycheck to paycheck every month, which I think is not beneficial for anybody, right? Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I'm thinking there's also downscaling, right? Let's say you realize the property you have you may not need it to be, the size that it is or the format that it is. So I guess, watching the market and seeing where those other options are, whether it's upscaling or downscaling, and then looking at your finances, as you said, make the most sense. Thank you for that.
Right. No problem. Thank you for the question. I think Tahura has a question.
Yes, hey, Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, Tahura, how are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. I had a quick question about debt, right? So is it recommended to jump into, getting into the market without like any debt, or like, is it okay to have like, because for example, I have student loan that I still need to pay off, and even maybe some credit card loans. So would you recommend clearing all that first and then jumping into the market, or is it okay to have some sort of debt? And like, how likely are you to get approved for a mortgage with that?
So I'll take that one. So really it depends, right? It's nice, to have no debt, right? But it's not impossible to get a mortgage while having debt, right? So what I would recommend is that, talk to me, right? We can go through your entire profile because it's case by case, right? We can run numbers based on your income, based on, the debt that you have and whether you can, sustain that debt. And then, if there's a target number that you're trying to get to in terms of a house purchase or a house price, at least by running these qualifications and these numbers, and these are not like, we're not going to the bank to run these numbers. I can run these numbers, for you if you just tell me, an estimate, of what your debts are, of what your income is and the down payment is. And then, from there, we can kind of gauge whether, is it better to pay off your debts, and then go into the market? Or, you can do both at the same time, maybe pay off, the credit card, or maybe pay off the student loan, but then keep one over the other. So really very situational up until, like we see the full profile.
Thank you so much.
No problem. And sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. The fact that you're thinking about it already and that it's in your head, in your mind, talking to me or Essen, it doesn't cost anything. Like, we're here to help. We love having these conversations. So, if you're thinking of buying a house, let's say in 1, 2, 3 years, have these conversations with us, reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help.
Data तो नहीं यूज हो रहा ना आपका? क्या वो टिश्यू? वो फर्स्ट बटन था ना, वो जो हेडफोन। अभी आवाज नहीं बंद। नहीं, वो ऐसे में कुछ किया मैंने, सब बंद किया। मुझे लगता है अपना आवाज आ रही। नहीं।
Hello?
I think we can now, Ethan.
Hey, Shabir.
Hey. I think Fatema, you were continuing. Sorry, you got cut by some other.
No. I was done. I just I just really wanted to say that if you are thinking about purchasing a house, like even if it's not now, start having that conversation, with a realtor, with a mortgage agent, and we can assist you and provide you, with the tools that you need to make that first purchase.
Thank you so much. Quick follow-up on that. For the down payment, is it always better to have the 20% down, or even 5% is okay?
So really depends. So if you're looking for a property that's over $1 million, the minimum down payment is generally 20%. If you can, get away, like let's say if the property is under $1 million, you can get away with just putting, as little as, 5% down. But once again, there is a mortgage insurance that is tied because you're not putting the full 20% down. So really, to have less than 20%, it kind of, gets you, your foot through the door, because, say like, a house that costs $700,000, 20% of that is $140,000, right? And like Essen said, like inflation is all over the place. It's so hard to save, right? So, even if you have some savings out there, and if the math makes sense, and if home ownership is what you want, then, maybe, having that minimum down payment, will allow you to get that house, even though you are going to be paying that mortgage insurance. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Essen, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in the market in terms of the different areas? Like I know in 2021, 2022, it was so hard. You were seeing multiple offers on properties, like so many offers. Are you seeing the same thing now, especially with supply being low?
Yeah, so right now, what I am seeing is that things are sort of mimicking what we saw in those years, where I'm starting to see multiple offers come back. I wouldn't say that homes are going like 200, 300,000 over asking all the time, but it seems like a lot of people have sort of jumped off the fence now and are all coming back at the same time. And I think it's a number of factors. Number one, obviously, I think with the rate hikes being paused for now, if anything, that sort of caused a little bit of stability. Again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. The second thing is that there's a lack of inventory across the board. And so with limited inventory, you're going to have obviously more competition. And then we're also heading into the spring market now, right? So spring market historically has always been a bit busier. So we're starting to see more people. I'm getting more calls from people, looking into buying a home, selling a home. But what we saw back in November, December of 2022, when the market was very flat, that's gone. So those deals, the best deals that could have been found were in November, December. And so now I think we're seeing that trajectory upwards again. Again, things can change on the dime. If rates go up, we may see a correction again. But I think right now it's a bit more competitive than what it was. And we're starting to see it come back, although not to full swing as 2021. We're starting to see it slowly mimic a little bit of that because we are seeing multiple offers on homes again. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about the interest rates? I know a lot of news on that. If not, then I can ask Fatema a question. Fatema, what's happening with the rates? If you can just kind of give us a high level information about interest rates in Canada in general.
Of course. So I would say the last 18 months, right? A lot of people who are getting into the market, they were opting for a variable rate mortgage. Things have now changed where people are opting for a shorter fixed term rate. And the reason for that is that there is a 1% spread between fixed and variable rates. And so, in people's minds, what they're thinking of doing is they're, getting that 2-3 year fixed term rate, hoping, once the Bank of Canada decides to, taper and bring the rates back down, they can take advantage and, get access to better rates. They're not locked into that 5-year term, that normally people go for. We've seen 9 consecutive rate hikes, since last March 2022. Hopefully the last increase that was supposed to happen didn't happen. They put a pause on it, and that was on March 8th. I think we have another announcement happening on the 12th of April. And that will kind of set the bar to see, which way the market is going to go, whether, like that's the end of the rate hikes for now, up until it stabilizes with everything that's been going on in the US as well, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and everything else that's going on. Plus our inflation has also come down. I know they want to get it to like that 2% mark, but they are seeing, the changes that are happening. So hopefully, Bank of Canada, puts that pause on, and, because I know a lot of people have been affected by the increases that have been happening over the last 18 months, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely been challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then do you anticipate the rates coming down next year, or are we gonna, like, what's your personal opinion?
Yeah, so we're already seeing fixed rates come down already. So, just quickly, to give you someone who puts less than 20% down, which is called an insured mortgage, we're seeing rates anywhere between 4.8 to 5%. So they've already significantly come down. For people who are putting 20% down, which is called a conventional mortgage, the rates are anywhere in and around like the mid 5s, right? So that's for like a fixed term mortgage. Variable rates are still higher in comparison. So hopefully, we're thinking early next year, 2024, we're going to start, rates, to taper off. Of course, they're not going to be like they were during the pandemic. So not that 1 to 2% that people are hoping for. Like that's never, that shouldn't even be legal, actually. Okay. Because we see the storm that it created in the market. So anywhere between like the 3-4%, that's where, it's to keep the economy healthy.
Thanks for that. Any other questions, guys?
I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam.
I'm happy that you're here. And I say salams to Fatema.
Walaikum salam.
I'm his mom, Ashen's mom.
Oh, nice to meet you, Auntie.
Yeah, thank you so much. And nice to meet you too. I just wanted to say that he's really working hard, and, I'm happy that he's talking to you and he's talking to others with interviews, or some are taking his interviews, whatever. But I'm proud of him as my son, and as a man, and as a husband, and as a father. I'm really proud of him that God gave him to me, a very good gift. First thing in my life, my first love is S and Raza.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mom.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Love you
Thank
too.
You. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Have all the success in your life, but help others too. All right?
Inshallah. Thank you. Keep us in your duas. Thank you. That was the best comment of the day.
Super cute. Super nice. Amazing.
Yeah, I think we're good then. Well, we can end it off in that. Shabir, did you have any questions? I know you jumped on a little bit later.
No, I was there from the beginning, but
you were? Okay.
I'm all good.
You're all good?
Shabir is my second love, okay?
Yeah, I know. great presentation, by the way, Anson. It was really nice to understand the whole process.
Yeah.
And keep it up, man. Good.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining in. Like I said, we have recorded this session, so we're going to be sending this out to you guys by Monday, hopefully. If you have any personal questions about the real estate market or the mortgages, by all means, you have our contacts. Give myself and Fatema a call. We'd be happy to sit down with you guys and give you a consultation, and hopefully one day, help you guys get into home ownership. But yeah, thank you so much for jumping on. Have a wonderful weekend and all the best, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.